All right, now we know. All right, so good morning, everyone. Happy Mother's Day to everyone. My name is Noam Dahary, and I am currently living in Denver, originally from Israel. Just arrived to Denver about a year and a half ago. I live here with Colby, who's my wife, who's studying to be a rabbi, and also with Oriya, our son that was born 3 weeks ago, our first son. So it is our first Mother's Day and Colby's first Mother's Day as a mother, which is very moving. I am, all of my life have been a Jewish educator, an Israel educator, a certified tour guide by the Israeli Ministry of Tourism. And now in Denver, other than running my own company for trips in Israel, that now, as you guys know, with the new situation, we're on a break. There are no trips going. But I'm also the director of Hillel at the University of Denver. And just, in 2 words, for those of you that don't know, Hillel is the organization for Jewish life on campus, meaning the understanding of the Jewish community that for Jewish students that go on campus, that go to university, most of the students around will not be Jewish, Jews are only about 2% of our population here in the States. In the university where I work, about maybe 7% of the population in the university, and the understanding that without a home, a body that will gather all of the Jewish students together, they won't have the opportunity to practice their Jewish traditions and holidays and so on. All right, so this is what I do, and today we're going to talk about the birds of the Holy Land. Sorry for that, guys. My dog loves the mailman. All right, today we're going to talk about the birds of Israel. And here we go. I'm going to share my screen now. Here we go.
That thing is in the middle.
All right. I will say that all of the images that you see in the presentation were taken by me. I'm by no means a professional photographer, but I love it. It's a hobby of mine, and you guys will be able to see all of the images in the presentation are mine. So if you have any comments or any questions, feel welcome to do so. All right. Today, when we will be talking about the birds of the Holy Land, we're going to tackle this subject from a few different angles. But one of the angles and one of the areas we're gonna tackle this subject is from the viewpoint of our ancient sources of the Bible. Which is very relevant for all of us as people that are connected through a spiritual place, as a church, or in our case, as a synagogue, or together, right? Where there are a lot of collaborations between the two. Colby and I arrive a lot to Trinity, and as I said, we have very good connections with Daryl and Pastor Ken in the community. So we're also going to view the idea of birds in the Holy Land and birds in Israel also through the eyes of the Bible. And I'm going to go back to this quote from Jeremiah in a little bit. But as we start, I want to ask you guys, and here's the first time that I'm engaging you in this conversation. I want to ask you guys either to answer, through the chat, or to unmute yourself and say, or just to think, what brings people to Israel? When people go and visit Israel, right? And something that I deal with a lot as a tour guide, I'm asking you, what brings people to Israel? Most of the people this last year, before everything started, Israel broke records with arrival of tourists, and really millions of visitors came to visit Israel that year. And what brings those people to Israel? Any ideas, any thought? Feel free to, again, as I said, write it through the chat or unmute yourself, whatever you feel like. And if not, I'm going to help you. I see a few of you are talking, but without unmuting themselves.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you great, Daryl. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I've been there 9 times with touring. And what brings us to Israel is to see the land where Jesus lived. Beautiful. And to see the historic religious symbols that remain and that are alive today. And to see the communities that are in Israel, the religious communities. It's just so diverse and so fulfilling to be in the midst of that group of people who worship in so different many ways and so meaningfully.
Beautiful. And Daryl said it beautifully, and I see on the chat that Amy said people want to see the places of the Bible. And Mike said, to me, it's be the pilgrimage, to be a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, right? So for sure. And if I go back to my presentation, which I'm going to do right now, you can see that I kind of could expect your answers, right? Not because they're not good, just because they're true. And here are a few pictures that I took from in some cases, famous sites. You can see on the right side of the image of the screen, you can see pilgrims lighting candles at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the place of burial and resurrection of Jesus. You can see a Jewish person prays and gets spiritual in the desert in Israel. And you can also see on the left a Muslim person, a Muslim man, praying at one of the holiest places for Islam in the world, at the Dome of the Rock, at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, outside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So for sure, you guys are right. Going to Israel to visit holy places, for pilgrimage, to be spiritual, to be with community, right? As you can see in this image, to be with community. This is specifically a trip that I led of young people from the Jewish community to Israel. This picture is from the sunset in Tel Aviv, and they're all praying together and and getting spiritual together. And another reason that people go to Israel is for the history, right? Which relates, right? We said places of the Bible, but history, archaeology, where that is just everywhere. That is just everywhere. And not only everywhere, it's also very ancient. I'll tell you a short little story, is that one time I guided a trip in Colorado a long time ago, about 8-9 years ago, when I worked at a summer camp. And I went to a place and someone wanted to show me a cave that was used by Native Americans in the past. And the guide told me, Noam, I have to show you something. This place, guess what, is 500 years old. And I told him, listen, it's a beautiful place and I'm in awe, I'm inspired, but you have to understand that as someone who's coming from Israel, I'm coming from a place that really every step you take, you might step on a stone that is 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 7,000, 8,000 years old. So the proportions are different. So people come to Israel for sure as we said, also for the history, for the archaeology, and also for vacation, right? Here's a picture from the Dead Sea. People go to, to vacation as well, and to relax and be, sometimes with families, sometimes just with a vacation. So those are the reasons for people to go to Israel. But we know that we gathered here today for another reason that many people don't know. And why do many people go to Israel to see, and I'm just gonna go here, to see this. So now we see a picture with many, many, many cranes, a few tens of thousands of cranes in a place called the Chula Valley in Israel. And the reason is, how come Israel is such an important birding destination? And what is the connection of the Bible and our sources to it? We're gonna learn together. So here's a question for you guys. Here I have a map of a state in America. Who knows which state is it by the shape?
Florida.
This is Florida. And Florida is 65,000 square miles. This is the size of Florida, 65,000 square miles. Another state that we love, and I took Florida, by the way, just by chance, because my last talk was in Florida. But here's a state that we all know and love. And it says Wyoming just because Wyoming is north of it, not because this is Wyoming. The square state that we all know, Colorado. And Colorado is actually very big, way bigger than Florida, 104 square miles. But then there's another place I want to show you, is this place, right? And just before I show and I expose the size of Israel, and you guys will understand why is it important for our birds theme, try to think or try to guess for yourself. If Florida is 65,000 square miles, if Colorado is 104,000 square miles, what will be the size of Israel? What is the size of Israel? A country that is in the size of a very small state in America, and the state is New Jersey. I know that some of you have heard this before. So the size of Israel is 8,000 square miles. That's about it, right? So we're talking about pretty much 12 times smaller than Colorado, or Colorado is 12 times bigger than Israel. Why is this important, right? In all of the 65,000 square miles of Florida, you can find 525 species at most that were ever reported. In Colorado, anyone has an idea how many species we can find of birds? In the 104 square miles of Colorado, you can find about 500 species of birds, which, by the way, are very nice numbers. Both Florida and Colorado are states in America that have very big variety of birds. In Israel, you can find 535 species of birds, meaning, right? So you can say, hey, no, wait a second, why are you telling this to us? Because it's pretty much the same as Colorado and Florida, but it's not. Because Israel is 12 times smaller than Colorado, meaning that when you go to a specific place in Israel, you have an amazing chance to see huge number of birds. So I showed you a picture from the Hula Valley in the north of Israel just a little bit ago. I showed you the picture that had, those thousands of cranes. When you walk in the Hula Valley in Israel, it's more than a chance. When you walk and you try a little bit to look around, you will see in one spot that you're walking in one trail that you're walking in, hundreds of species. You'll see 200-300 species of birds in the same spot. In Israel being so small and having such a huge diversity of species, make it such an amazing, is one of the things that is making it such an amazing bird destination. There's another thing that makes Israel, or kind of like they're all tied together, right? So there's another thing that connects to it that also makes Israel an amazing birding destination, which is in this small space of 8,000 square miles that I have mentioned, you have 5 different climate areas, 5 different climate types in over 8,000 square miles, sorry. Which is incredible, which is absolutely crazy. And it allows not only birds, but it allows any species, any animal to find their own habitat that is comfortable for them to grow and be, and really allows this amazing diversity of species of birds, and again, and not only birds, but birds, reptiles, mammals, really allows it. And so what are those climate types that we see in Israel? And here I have kind of like a view of Israel, three-dimensional view of Israel from the side, from the west, from the view of from the Mediterranean. But what are those climate types that we see in Israel? From the north, where we see snow-peaked mountains, the tallest of them is the Hermon, the tallest mountain in Israel, that compared to the Rockies is not huge, but for the Middle East definitely has a good elevation. The peak of the Hermon gets to about 9 to 10,000 feet above sea level. Depends where you're at. Depends if you're on the Israeli side of the Hermon or the Syrian side of the Hermon. So we said from snowy peaks in the north, as you guys can see. Areas that have sometimes almost alpine climate conditions. All the way to the south, where we have arid, dry desert, that, as you can see, it's even different than some of the deserts that we know from, in parts of the US or parts of Colorado even that are a bit deserty. We're talking about the Negev desert is in an arid, dry desert. In this place where this picture is taken, the area of Machtesh Ramon, the Ramon crater in the south, we're talking about an area that is getting about 50 milliliters of rain a year, which is practically nothing. It's practically almost no rain. So another climate type that we see, by the way, the Negev desert in Israel is a part of the global desert chain that surrounds the world, from the Negev in Israel to the Sahara to the Gobi Desert, and so on. Another area that we can see is our areas of sand dunes, where animals, where birds, reptiles, mammals that love areas, sandy areas, can live. So definitely areas of sand, as we can see. Right, and another climate type that we can see in Israel is Mediterranean climate, right? Mediterranean climate, which we will expect, right? Israel is on the Mediterranean. You can see those beautiful beaches, those beautiful shorelines in Israel that again allow more species, more birds, more animals to live in those areas as well, as we can see. We can also see forests, right? So dense forests with a lot of water, tall trees, very dense, very crowded forests. Also more open kinds of forests that we can see with those oak trees. Those one are the Tabor oaks that we can see, that are named, by the way, after the Mount Tavo, which is a significant site for Christian tradition. And all the way to wetlands, right? All the way to wetlands and swamps that are a beautiful home for a bird that, by the way, we have also the birders of you here know that we also have here in Colorado. This is the marsh harrier, a bird that is a master in really maneuvering between those dense swamp areas and diving for the prayer. So we said wetlands, swamps. You can see the snowy egret. You can see here, and also cliffs, right? Areas of cliffs and big rocks that again are another home for different species and different kind of birds. All right. Oh, and another climate type is African savanna. Look at that, right? Still views from Israel that really, if we don't know that it's Israel, we really believe that we're in an African savanna. And again, this variety of climate types will bring the amazing variety of species into the small 8,000 square miles of Israel. So this is one thing. The other thing is, look at this. Look at Israel will be, I hope that you can see my pointer, and my pointer points at Israel right now. Israel is in the center. Israel is in the center of the second biggest migration route in the world. What is the first one, by the way? North America to South America. True. The second one, the second biggest one in the world, is this one, is this migration route. It goes all the way from northern Asia and Northern Europe, all the way to Africa and the southern parts of Africa. And guess which small piece of land is exactly in the middle of this migration route? And all of the birds that are passing mostly through the land, mostly over land, that are migrating over the land, are going, are at least passing in Israel, and some of them are stopping or even nesting there. And let me give you a little example of what does it mean, this location, right? My first time in the US, the first time I have been to the US, I traveled with my uncle, with my mom's brother, and we drove through, we've done a beautiful road trip around the US. And when we got to the deserts of Arizona and Utah, we decided to take a few side roads, right? Not to take the main road, but to take a few side roads to get the scenic view, the scenic roads. And it was a bit scary. It was a bit scary because we drove for a couple 100 miles without seeing anyone and without having any gas station or any place to get gas or food. And it was a bit crazy, but it was beautiful. But I remember the last gas station that we stopped to get some snacks and food and gas before we went on the side road. And I also remember the first gas station that we saw after we drove in the road, after a couple 100 miles without seeing anyone, where we could breathe and know that we're safe, and kind of like refuel our car and refuel our stomachs. For the birds, Israel is exactly those gas stations. What do I mean? Imagine that you're a bird who's migrating from Europe, right? Or from northern Asia, from northern Russia, right? You migrate all the way through the fertile lands of Europe, but then before you need to cross the Sahara Desert, guys, we're talking about the Sahara Desert, or for some birds even here around this area, the Great Arabian Desert of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and so on. Israel is the last fertile land that you will see before you need to do this crazy journey of crossing the Sahara Desert into the deserts of Africa, and then into the more fertile areas that more in Central and Southern Africa. So really, Israel is this last gas station that those birds will meet. On the way back, exactly the opposite, right? I just crossed the Sahara Desert. I'm just done with my journey. I can rest in Israel, in the fertile valleys in Israel that have enough food, enough water for me before I continue my journey and I go more north. And so another reason why Israel is such an amazing birding destination. Migration is another huge talk and huge topic that we can cover, but I'm going to touch migration in a little bit and also see what is the Bible's viewpoint on it. Right. All right, and here we can see, right, again from another view of crane migrations in Israel. By the way, talking about another topic of how do you manage this amount of bird. We're talking about, in this specific spot that you see, about something like 60,000 cranes that are in the same spot in the same time. Some of those places are nature reserves, some of those places are fields, right? And another question that is important to bring at some point, I'm not going to answer it now because again, it's a whole other topic, but how do you manage man and bird, right? How do you manage human and wildlife when you have suddenly a flock of thousands of cranes or thousands of storks or whatever it is, cranes especially, because cranes eat the fields. How do you manage it between the human needs and the man's needs and the natural world? Here are a few more of those beautiful cranes that actually in the last few years, they're not only stopping in Israel as a station on the way to Africa, many of them stay in the Hula Valley in the north of Israel. Look at that. Really views, for those of you guys that are already planning their trip to Israel to see the views, really, I can tell you as someone who traveled the world, that those views of those amounts of birds and cranes, really views that you don't see outside of Africa. Really phenomenal. Really phenomenal. Now I'm gonna kind of like swing pretty fast over a few different birds, and I'll tell you, or actually the Bible will tell us what is common to all of them. But you know what, before that, let me go out of my screen share for a second, see that everyone's doing okay, and ask if anyone have any questions until now, before we dive into a biblical reference about a few of those birds. And if you have a question, you can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can write it in the chat too. Great. So I'm going to move on. Again, feel free to ask questions if you have them. All right. So here we are. All right. So we can see the little heron here. And we can see a white-throat kingfisher. Again, for bird lovers here in Colorado, we have a different kind of kingfisher here in Colorado. We have the belted kingfisher, who's bigger and has different colors. But in Israel, we actually have three kinds of kingfishers. We have the white-throat kingfisher that we can see here. We have the common kingfisher, and we also have another kingfisher that we'll meet soon in this presentation. A blacktail, a common buzzard, an Egyptian vulture. Look how beautiful and impressive this beautiful bird is. And what is common to all of those birds that we have just seen? We can see a long-eared owl, and I'm sorry that sometimes I mess up the English names of the birds, but just be merciful to me, because I work hard to know all of the species of birds in Israel, both in Hebrew and in English. So it's kind of like double the work to know all the names. In Hebrew, this bird is called oach, long-eared owl. But what is common to all of the birds that I showed you until now? And I'm gonna quote here from Leviticus. And in Leviticus, we can see this quote: "These are the birds you are to regard as unclean and not eat because they are unclean: the eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the red kite, any kind of black kite, any kind of raven, the horned owl, the screech owl, the gull, any kind of hawk, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the white owl, the desert owl, the osprey, the stork, any kind of heron, the hoopoe, and the bat." Right. Well, so we have a quote here from Leviticus that tells us that is referring to the Jewish laws of kashrut, the Jewish laws of eating kosher, what you can eat and what you cannot eat. And what is interesting to me, I think that the whole idea of, in the choice of the Jewish tradition to define, right, what you eat and what not is a very interesting and amazing choice, and something that unites in a way the Jewish people as a people. But this is not what I want to talk about. I want to think together that the sentence that we just read was written when, right? I'm quoting from Leviticus, right? I'm quoting from Leviticus, meaning that this sentence that I just read was written about 3,000 years ago. And for us today, it makes a lot of sense to say, you know, hey, right, of course, it makes sense that we know how to define between birds, right? Because we have so many scientists, and we have, you know, laboratories and researches, and, you know, and so many people that are dealing with it. And today it even became such a common hobby, and everyone's talking about it on Facebook and social media and sharing their pictures, and it's huge. But you guys look at the details that whoever wrote this, right? Whoever wrote this sentence in Leviticus, and each of us, you know, with their own beliefs of what is exactly the source, right? This is one of the most you know, the biggest argument is like, who wrote the Bible? We have no idea who wrote the Bible, you know, from people that believe that that people wrote it, to people that believe that it's living words of God, and so on. And every opinion, of course, is appreciated and welcome, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that we're talking about an ancient text that whoever wrote it could go down to details and say, not saying, hey, you're not allowed to eat birds. They're saying, we know many species of birds, and we follow those species. We know how they look. We know their behaviors. And we can tell you that those specific birds you cannot eat. So I'm not even talking about the rules of kashrut. I'm talking about going down to details and identifying the birds 3,000 years ago. Pretty amazing, right? So now we have a different view, that in the Bible, there's not only view of how people are on people's relationship with God. We have details, we have very detailed information about the natural world, about the natural wonders, and about the creations of God. Pretty amazing. Let's move on forward, and we'll see a few more examples that are not only about details, but also about behavior. Look at this, right? So here in the picture, you can see a very special stork. It's a black stork, right? So it's very similar to the white stork that we know, but it's a black stork, so slightly different in colors and behavior, pretty similar. Also in sizes, pretty similar. And look at this quote from Jeremiah, right? Even the stork in the sky knows her appointed seasons, and the dove, the swift, and the thrush observe the time of their migration. But my people do not know the requirements of the Lord, right? So Jeremiah says, you know, my people struggle to satisfy the Lord, struggle to behave the way the Lord wants them to. But who can we learn from? Who can we learn from? And look at the knowledge that Jeremiah have when he says this sentence. He says, even the stork in the sky, right? So it's not only that he say, okay, there's a bird in the sky. He knows that this bird is the stork. And he knows the stork so well that he knows that the stork knows her appointed seasons, meaning that the stork knows how to define the changes in the seasons, and also the changes in the season between different years. So, right, if the spring comes a little later this year, the storks know how to figure this out and to migrate in the right time and to behave in the appropriate way. And he says, my people don't know how to do it, but you guys can learn from who? From the stork. So again, going back to this idea that thousands of years ago, people that live on this earth weren't only focused again in their relationship with God or with other people or with survival, which is what we think, right? In the past, people didn't have technology, they only tried to survive. No, they knew so well the behavior of the natural wonders around them. Beautiful. Let's see another example, right? We can see more storks here. On the top picture, we can see black storks, two black storks. On the bottom one, we can see a white stork. And look how beautiful is this first quote from Psalm. From Psalm 104:17, we can see, where the birds build their nests, the stork makes her home in the pines. What does it mean, this sentence? Look how much attention and how much details this sentence have. This sentence defines, whoever wrote this and whoever said it knew that when other birds build nests and when they migrate or when they just stay in a place and nest there, they can move between different nests. The stork, which is something we know today with our science and with art research, the storks often go back where? To the same nest. And this is why it's not a nest. What is it? What does it say here? It's a home. It's not a nest, it's a home. And often we see the storks bringing pieces, bringing all kinds of small tribes and things for the nest to add more material, because it's not a nest, it's a home. Look at the details. Again, we're talking about thousands of years ago, right? Not researchers today that get a scholarship and have thousands of dollars and lots of time to follow the behavior of the storks. We're talking about people that had really very close attention to everything around them. Really, really amazing. Maybe a part of it is that, without the temptations that we have today of social media and screens and phones and TV and all of the things that we're so busy with all the time, people had a lot of time to pay attention to what's going on around them. Let's move on to the next quote that we can see. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the Ipha between the earth and the heaven. Right, in Zechariah 5:9. Again, look at those details. There are two main kinds, let's call it, of migrating birds. Right, when birds migrate, there are mostly the small birds and mostly birds that migrate above the seas and the oceans. They really work hard with their wings. They work hard with their wings all the time, and they really put a lot of effort in working their wings and flying through this migration. Big birds that are migrating above the land are using hot air. They're using thermic air that is coming from the ground, and they're opening their wings. The stork is one of them. And if you try to kind of like vision the last time that you've seen a stork in the sky, or the last time that you've seen a pelican in the sky, what way the storks are migrating and moving from place to place? Are they moving their wings a lot? Not so much. They're opening the wings, letting the wind, right? Letting the hot thermal air come in their wings and take them through those long distances. And look how beautifully it says it here, right? And came out two women, and the wind was in their wings as they were storks, as they had wings of storks. Look at that. Beautiful. All right. Stopping my sharing for a little bit, just to see that everyone is okay. Everyone's still with us. Good. Show me thumbs up if you're okay. Good. Sounds good. Sounds good. Good opportunity if there are any questions. All right. Yeah, feel free to also, if you have a question, you can either ask me on the spot. You can also write it in the chat, and you can also ask at the end. We'll have a few minutes in the end. So we're moving on forward. Look at this. This is something that I find fascinating. One of the birds that is most mentioned in the Bible and in other of our ancient sources is the vulture. Is the vulture. And look what does it say the vulture on the vulture, both in the Bible, in Shmuel, in Samuel, Samuel 2:123, and also in the Jewish Codex of the Talmud in Masechet Chagiga 13. It says the vulture, the king of the birds, the king of the birds, right? Not less, the king of the birds. And then after the famous story of Saul and Jonathan, in the morning song that David is reading, he says, Saul and Jonathan in life, they were loved and admired, and in death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles, but in Hebrew, right, when you read the Bible in Hebrew, it says nesharim, it means vultures. And they were stronger than lions. So I have a challenge, I have a problem with, not a problem, it's a challenge with the way that our sources, that the Bible and our ancient sources are talking about vultures. Like, take a look at the vulture, right? Let's take a look at the vulture. This is the vulture. I mean, I think that every bird is beautiful, and the vulture is definitely beautiful, but the vulture is a scavenger, right? Is a scavenger that has a partially balded head. I think not such a majestic bird, really. You know, not such a majestic bird. We see here. This is a vulture a picture that was taken in Mount Carmel in Israel, and you can see a griffon vulture. This is a griffon vulture taken in Israel. And as you can see, it's not really a majestic bird. So I was really struggling with the idea, how come in our sources, the vulture is the king of the birds? And when David wanted to say about Saul and Jonathan, that they were amazing and strong and fast, he said that they were swifter than vultures. It says nesharim, vultures. It doesn't really say eagles. It says vultures. And one of the things that, you know, it kind of like brings to our understanding is that even though, as we said, there's an amazing going down to details in those descriptions that we see from the Bible, not all the time the name of the species as we know it today is what the author have meant in the Bible. Meaning that I think that when they said this, the vulture is the king of the birds, do they mean the vulture? I don't think so. And most of the researchers today don't think so. And when it says that Saul and Jonathan, as a compliment, were swifter than eagles and stronger than lions, they don't mean that they were swifter than than vultures. Because vultures are not so swift, they're not so fast. They're not so majestic. And really what we think today is that in the places in the Bible, when they say vultures, nesher in Hebrew, nesharim in plural in Hebrew, they actually meant eagles. Look at the eagles. I have a selection of eagles here. And we can see from the snake eagle to the osprey, that is the fish eagle, and greater spotted eagle, and so on. We're talking really about majestic birds that are fast, lethal, not scavengers as the vultures are. The eagles really are probably what our sources and what the biblical author meant when they said vultures. Here's, by the way, a way for us to know it is not only by guessing, but also, and here I'm going back to Daryl, to what Daryl said earlier, right? We're going to Israel to see some of the biblical and the historical sites. And when we go back to the archaeology in Israel, and we see those beautiful, detailed decorations on, in this case here, on an ancient Jewish synagogue from the 5th century, we can see beautifully that those majestic animals that they meant and became so admired in Jewish tradition and in biblical tradition in general are not vultures. They're not vultures. They're definitely eagle. We can see in the bottom part, this is the headstone of the entrance to the synagogue, to an ancient synagogue in the Golan Heights, again from the 5th century. And we can see two snake eagles, which is this bird that we see here on the left. It's called, in Hebrew, it's called chivyai. It's from the word in Aramaic, chivya. Chivya in Aramaic means a snake, and we can see the snake eagle as the majestic bird that our source is talking about, and not the vulture. So I hope I made pretty clear this this interesting point. I'm gonna skip this little part, and kind of like as we get closer to the end of our session, I wanted to kind of like open our minds and eyes to the Bible as a source, not only to tell us about birds and other wildlife, but really about other natural phenomena. Look at this quote from Psalms, right? Who looks on the earth and it trembles, who touches the mountains and they smoke. Amazing. A quote from 3,000 years ago that describes us what?
Volcano.
Describes us a volcano. Unbelievable, right? Today, there are people that all of the work is to research volcanoes and research the core of Earth and where this amazing material that is shooting out of the earth coming from. But think about it, 3,000 years ago, people were sensitive enough and were attentive enough to everything happens around them, and they could stand in the same places that we stand and look at those things that today we are all inspired by, and stand in awe and says, wow, look at those amazing things that God created. And you know, today we know better to create the balance between God's work and also about the science, right? It's a very delicate balance, right, between God's creation and science. I personally believe that they can live together. Some people do, some people don't. I believe that they can live together. But back then, all of, you know, like all of the responsibility, the credit for this amazing thing is, you know, is given to God. You know, God touches the earth and it trembles. God touches the mountains and they smoke. Look, another very fascinating and smart and clever connection that they've done here. They've done a connection between earthquakes and volcanoes, which is a scientific connection that we can only do today after we research it. We know that areas that are sensitive to earthquakes will be areas of rings of fire, will be areas that are that will be mostly possible to have volcanoes in them. So look at this amazing connection that we know today from science, but the biblical author and the people who created our sources knew those things 3,000 years ago. Unbelievable that the Bible can be not only our moral guide and our spiritual guide, but it can be really our tour guide and our guide for natural wonders on earth. And one last thing before I give the stage to back to Jen and the friends to finish with a blessing, is a little bit one little part for about the idea of capturing the moment. As I said, I'm not a professional photographer, but I love taking pictures of birds and I love taking pictures of wildlife. There's something so exciting about doing it. You know, I love also taking pictures of landscape, but you know, when I go and take a picture of, you know, Emerald Lake in the Rocky Mountain National Park, or of a canyon in Israel that I love, I know that the canyon will be there. I know that the lake will be there. I know that the mountain will be there. I know that the lighting will be different. But I know in a way what to expect. But when I go out to look for a bird or to look for wildlife, I might walk around or stay in the same place for hours and hours and not have even one shot, right? Not even one image. And the things that that needs to happen in order to catch the moment, right? So in order to catch the pied kingfisher that we see here, right? Exactly in the time of sunset, when the background is purple and beautiful, blue and purple, and he's exactly in the right position before he goes down for the prayer. Or when I capture the white throat kingfisher, exactly in the time when he catches the frog, and the frog's eyes, sorry for the graphic image, are popping out, right? From in the time of hunt. It's hard to really predict those moments and to know what the future holds, or to know that when I go to this lake and I see those cranes, it will be a super foggy sunrise that will make the background look like it's golden, or to know that exactly at this point the horned owl is going to look at me the same way it does, or that the water of the egret are going to be rising as they are, or that this burrowing owl is gonna fly at this second. So really capturing the moment is such an exciting experience that I really wanted to share with you. This is like another part. So not only like looking at the birds, not only connecting the biblical sources to them, but really the experience of capturing the moment is special and unique, and is a part of this whole experience of loving the natural world and the world of birds. So thank you guys so much. I'm gonna go back to our thing. Thank you guys so much. I think that I left exactly right time, maybe for one question and then for a blessing for the end. And Jen, you'll take it from here. You'll tell me.
Thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it.
This is Paula, not Jan, and I'm going to give the closing prayer. But first, before I do, Noam, I wanted to thank you so much. You all do, for that very interesting presentation. I didn't realize that the ancient Israelites were such astute observers of birds and their behaviors, but now we know a lot more than we did. For the closing prayer, I've chosen the words from a familiar hymn, "For the Beauty of the Earth." Let us pray. For the beauty of the earth, for the beauty of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies, for the beauty of the hour, of the day and of the night, hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, for the joy of human love, brother, sister, parent, child, friends on earth and friends above, for all gentle thoughts and mild. Lord of all, to thee we raise this our joyful hymn of praise. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Paula. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're welcome.
All right. And Noam, thank you so much. And Noam, could you give us just a couple of words about next week?
Of course. Yeah, next week, thank you, Jen, for reminding me. Next week, we're going to have another session that will deal with a completely different topic, unrelated to birds, unrelated to wildlife. Next week, we're going to talk about the colors and diversity in the Jewish world. Most of us know Jews, especially here in America, is looking, behaving, talking in a very specific way. And what we're going to do next week is that we're going to open our horizons to get to know the idea of Jews of color, right? Jews that are coming from Spain, from Arab lands, from Africa, and we're going to talk a little bit about their roots, their traditions, and it'll be great.
Thank you all. Does anyone want to unmute yourself and say a word? I'll give a couple of people a chance to just say what you'd like to say. Let's hear from you. We're waiting.
Thank you, Noam. As I mentioned in the chat, I love your exuberance, love your photography, your presentation's wonderful. Thanks for sharing it with us, and congratulations on parenthood.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
One last comment. Go for it, Daryl.
Thank you, Noam. And thanks. It's good to see you all today, and blessings to you. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much for joining us, Daryl, in India. Thanks to all of you, and have a very good Sunday. And then we will see you next week for Trinity Academy. No, we'll see you then.
Looking
Bye-bye.
forward. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.